1,000 years ago, there was a great magical kingdom called Valhalla. In a time when it was natural to possess and use magic, an evil wizard stole a powerful treasure from the first wizard and wanted to use it to destroy the world. The princess of Valhalla, a sorceress of immense power, promptly rose to confront him. But nothing seemed to stop the enemy, and in the end, she lost all her allies. She then realized that this wizard was disaster, death personified. She knew there was only one way to stop death once and for all: the forbidden spell, destruction. Knowing this was the only way to stop the wizard, the princess did not hesitate to use it. Thus, Glasha Leonoel, the last princess of Valhalla, cast the forbidden spell, defeating the wizard and saving the world. However, both she and her kingdom paid a terrible price for it. One gently caresses the photo of Glasha Leonoel. The hand belongs to a young man with silver hair and golden eyes who is thoughtfully admiring the book about the history of the last princess of Valhalla. Since childhood, he preferred stories about princesses. He always asked his nanny to tell him the story of the princess of Valhalla and how she bravely sacrificed herself to save the world. The scene shifts to a snow-covered forest, a small white animal walking while observing a wolf drooling. The little white ferret stops and begins to dig something while the wolf approaches. Noticing the shadow of the animal covering the ferret, it turns to look. The imposing figure of the gray wolf looks curiously at the ferret. As the ferret turns, we discover that the wolf is named Cedric, and he is the leader of the gray wolf pack in the region. Calling the ferret princess, he questions what she is doing. She calmly begins to respond, and upon noticing that Cedric is accompanied, she asks him where he and his pack are going. Cedric explains that he is going to teach the pups how to hunt. As the pups see who Cedric is talking to, they jump towards the princess, excitedly asking her to play with them. Cedric saves the princess from the cuteness attack of the pups while scolding them for the mess. The princess then realizes that Freya, the smallest of the pups, is not there, and curiously asks where she is. A voice asking the siblings to wait is heard behind a tall trunk that has fallen on the ground, and only Freya's little paws can be seen trying to climb the trunk. The princess sighs at the situation, asking Cedric to let her go so she can help poor Freya. She greets Freya, who is crying and upset for not being able to reach her siblings. Adjusting her fur, the ferret says that Cedric saved her from the excessive display of affection from his pups. The siblings start teasing Freya for not being able to jump very high yet, and boast that when they were younger, they could jump easily. The chatter and excitement of the pups make the ferret comment to Cedric that raising pups must not be an easy task. Talking about the pups reminds Cedric that he had something to tell the princess. He says that the other day he went to the stream to practice hunting with the pups, and they found a different object there. And since they are deep in the mountains, he thought it unlikely that any human had dropped it recently, so he assumed it was an object that had been there for many years, from the kingdom of Valhalla. The princess ponders for a few seconds upon hearing this. When Cedric says that he kept the object and that if the princess is interested, it is in the cave with his wife. The ferret, still thoughtful, thanks him for the information and heads towards the cave. At the entrance of the cave, a gray she-wolf invites the ferret to enter. Her name is Anna, and she is Cedric's wife and also the mother of the pups. The princess notices that she seems tired and gives her a small caress. Anna explains that taking care of such energetic pups has been so exhausting that she barely has time to take care of herself. Touching the she-wolf's forehead while a green light shines from her paws, the ferret warns Anna that she needs to take better care of herself. After all, if she gets sick, who will take care of those little rascals? Anna feels rejuvenated after the magic done by the ferret and thanks her for the help. The princess is happy to be able to help, but admits that she wishes she could use other types of magic as well. Still grateful, Anna begins to search for something in the cave. She approaches the princess with a metal item in her mouth and hands it to the ferret, saying that she believes she came to the cave looking for this. The ferret accepts the item and recognizes it as soon as she lays eyes on it. A small jewel used as a hair accessory. Truly a very popular item in Valhalla. This reminds her of her beautiful and beloved Valhalla. In the past, a magical and shining kingdom full of life, but now a place that has crumbled into mere grains of dust. She nostalgically remembers her home, her Valhalla, and how she used to be a beautiful woman with greenish hair. Now we understand why the wolves call her princess, because the ferret is actually Leonol, the last princess of Valhalla. While looking at the small accessory, the princess remembers that she never liked going to balls, but she had to go to them. She liked to wear simple accessories like these to adorn her hair. Sitting next to Anna, she recalls that her mother didn't like these accessories very much because she thought they were too simple. With a certain sadness in her voice and facing reality, she realizes that she has no more reason to wear these accessories. Although she hated going to balls, today she misses them a lot. With a pained and sad expression, she remains silent for a few seconds, realizing the irony of her life. Anna looks at her worriedly. But someone approaches the cave, shouting for Anna. Another wolf named Rhodey arrives hurriedly with an alarming tone. Anna and the princess leave the cave to check what is happening. He informs them that well-armed hunters have just entered the mountains. Anna remembers that the last time the hunters came, they were after the red foxes and ended up killing several for their fur. But Rhodey says that this time they are after the wolves' fur. Worried and scared, Anna asks what they should do, thinking that fleeing might be the best option for her pups. But the ferret has a much better idea. And with shining eyes, he says that they will make sure the hunters never return to the mountains. Meanwhile, in another part of the mountain, Soaz von Ramaeliel, king of Palarod, rides alongside the hunters. Leonoel asks if they know in which region of the forest the hunters are. The wolf replies that they set up camp at the base of the mountain and must have just started climbing the mountain a little while ago. Pensive, Leonoel believes that regardless of their objectives, the safest thing is to take the foxes and the pups to a safe place. With that, she asks Rhodey to take the foxes to a safe location. While she says that she needs to gather all the wolves of the mountain because she refuses to just watch the animals be attacked again. Anna asks if she should go call the wolves, but Leonoel says they need to act quickly. They can't afford to search one by one. She takes a deep breath, filling her lungs as much as possible. She exhales, shouting as loud as she can. "Cedric! What was that sound just now?" asks Shilos von Rodon, the royal guard accompanying the king, trembling with fear. The hunters whisper in the background, wondering if he really is a knight of the king with such an attitude. The chief of the hunters, Sven Doff, looks at Shilos with a serious expression and says that the noise must have come from the white goblin of Agobes. Shilos goes into total panic, freezing in fear. Soaz, the king of Palarod, unlike his knight, remains unshaken. He even jokes that the goblin seems to have great vocal cords. But Shilos, still trembling, insists that they are dealing with a monster, and that this is no joke. He asks the king to return to the city and call for reinforcements, more weaponry, and royal guards. Soaz looks at the hunters and says that they will be fine since the hunters are used to the mountains and will be much more effective than the royal knights. The hunters are thrilled by the king's praise. Seeing the hunters' reaction, Soaz smiles and waves at them while thinking that they are only there today to do a little scouting and reconnaissance of the area. But he purposely didn't tell Shilos this because he finds his reactions amusing. Soaz asks the chief of the hunters if he saw the goblin with his own eyes. Sven replies that he did not, but some of his men did. He explains that the creature has its entire body covered in white fur, which makes it difficult to identify and see it in the snow, and that the goblin is as agile as the wind, making it hard to chase it. The hunter who saw it tried to attack it, but before he even realized it, the goblin was already behind him. He felt the intense presence of the goblin, and when he turned around, he saw bright aquamarine eyes staring at him. The poor hunter could barely explain what happened, trembling from the terror he felt. Says Sven, finishing his explanation. Upon hearing about the aquamarine eyes, Soaz becomes a bit thoughtful. Returning from his thoughts, he looks at the hunters and asks if any of the hunters who saw the goblin have died or disappeared. Meanwhile, Shilos begs them to return to the city because he is scared, throwing a tantrum like a spoiled child. Sven thinks about everything the hunters who found the goblin told him and concludes that no one died or disappeared. Most just ran away in fear. Satisfied with Sven's answer, Soaz turns to Shilos and asks if he heard that no one was hurt or died, but he was too busy throwing a tantrum and didn't hear anything. Soaz asks them to hurry up because they have wasted too much time with their knight's tantrum. Trying to encourage Shilos to keep walking, Soaz throws a small pouch in his direction, saying he will give him something he likes if he promises to behave. Soaz reveals that inside the pouch is prime-cut beef jerky, a product from the Rengerlin region. The king smiles, hoping that Shilos will accept the small bribe without complaining. Shilos admits he loves beef jerky, especially from the Rengerlin region, but insists that his life is more important. Sven watches incredulously at the situation, concluding that it is even hard to say who the subject is. Seeing a familiar marking, he warns that they are approaching the temporary camp. Still determined to mess with Shilos, Soaz puts his fingers to his lips in a sign of silence, asking Sven not to tell Shilos that they will rest a bit at the temporary camp and then go down the mountain back. Sven simply obeys the orders, and as soon as they all arrive at the campsite, they start organizing their things. Soaz is thoughtful, looking at the sky when he becomes curious about something he sees. He asks a hunter who is nearby what that bird flying in circles above them is called. Looking at the sky, the hunter says it is probably a seagull. Soaz finds it curious to see a seagull in the middle of the mountains. He asks if there happens to be any ocean nearby. The hunter explains that the northern ocean is just beyond the Agobis Mountains. Even so, Soaz is bothered by something. He questions if it is normal for these types of birds to be flying in circles, because he finds that a bit strange. The man agrees, explaining that if they were hawks, maybe. But seagulls normally don't act like that. Soaz looks thoughtfully at the birds. Then he comments that they are acting as if they are informing someone of a person's or a place's location. This surprises the hunter. The scene cuts to Soaz asking Shillis to calm down. But Shillis is freaking out, irritated that someone stole his beef jerky. He points to the culprit in the sky, and we see a duck flying with the pouch of beef jerky in its beak. The duck, mocking Shillis, gives a smug little smile. Soaz then realizes that maybe that's why the birds were flying in circles. They were after food. Shillis grabs his bow and arrows and sets out determined to recover his beef jerkies. The hunter from earlier is upset because Shillis took his bow, but Soaz reassures him, saying that Shillis should be back soon. He is a terrible archer. Suddenly it starts to snow, and with the snow the temperature drops a bit. Soaz is asking everyone to prepare to go down the mountain, when he is interrupted by a shout from Shillis. Irritated, he asks Shillis what it is this time. Shillis is petrified, pointing towards the trees. See Green Eyes? He stutters as Green Eyes watch him from among the trees. But soon, more eyes shine among the trees, and a furious growl resonates. Wolves. Soaz realizes quickly. They are surrounded by a pack of wolves. Soaz fixes his gaze on the trees, alert to any movement, while he reaches for his sword. He pulls it from its sheath firmly, ready for whatever comes. A large gray wolf leaps from behind the trees, announcing the start of the attack. It charges at Soaz, knocking him to the ground, but Soaz, quick, uses the sheath to contain it. The wolf bites the sword sheath furiously. Soaz finishes drawing the blade and, with a precise strike, hits the beast that was attacking him. He gets up, panting, asking if the others are okay. Shillis is fighting against two wolves while complaining to Soaz that he is not okay at all. The king gives a small, sarcastic smile, saying that he doesn't seem to be doing that badly since he has the energy to complain. Soaz notices a figure approaching Shillis out of the corner of his eye. He shouts for the knight to look behind him. When Shillis turns around, he notices a gray wolf approaching to attack him. Quickly, the knight attacks the wolf with his sword, hitting it on one side of its face. Soaz, while fighting off the other wolves, finds it strange that his knight is silent and asks if everything is okay. Shillis is scared by what he just realized. He tells the king that something is very wrong. Even with the attacks, the wolves do not decrease in number. No matter how many cuts or arrows they receive, their wounds heal quickly. It's as if they are immortal. Shillis screams, succumbing to the panic of his discovery. The wolves quickly reorganize, ready to attack again. Soon, Soaz and Shillis are completely surrounded. Shillis realizes that, apparently, the wolves are specifically focused on the king. Soaz, noticing the same, wonders why that is. The king remembers an event that occurred a few months ago. At that time, an ambassador from Kreigberg came to his kingdom, demanding animal pelts as tribute. And because of this, a great hunt for foxes was organized and carried out. Were the wolves attacking him as a form of revenge against their fox companions? Concludes Shillis, recalling the same event from months ago. Soaz thinks that this doesn't make sense. Wolves and foxes being allies. But no matter how unlikely that seems, it is undeniable that the wolves are clearly focusing their attacks primarily on him. Soaz carefully observes the wolves around him and confirms his theory. And to make matters worse, the wolves do not decrease in number, and with each passing moment, he and his men are being further cornered. Among the trees, Soaz's horse appears, fleeing from a wolf, and this gives the king an idea. With a plan in mind, he orders Shillis to pay attention to what he is about to say. He explains that he will attract the wolves' attention. Meanwhile, Shillis must lead all the hunters to a safe location. But the royal knight finally acts according to his position. He pleads with the king not to do this, as he will end up being killed by the pack of wolves. Soaz explains that they have no other option, and since the wolves are clearly after him, this is their best chance. Shillis continues to argue, offering to lure the wolves instead of his king. Ignoring Shillis, Soaz whistles, calling his horse. Upon hearing the call, the animal gallops towards him. The king grabs the reins as it approaches. With a firm push, Soaz mounts the horse. In a steady voice, he tells Shillis that he is counting on him. As soon as Soaz begins to move away, the wolves start to chase him, completely ignoring Shillis. So Soaz moves away as quickly as possible. He realizes that his plan is working. He is already far enough from the camp. But the snow begins to fall more heavily. The wolves continue their pursuit. The intense blizzard starts to hinder Soaz's vision, preventing him from clearly seeing the path ahead. But the situation worsens when the horse slips due to the snow. Soaz grips the reins tightly, feeling his body sway with the animal. And with a loud crash, Soaz and his horse tumble down the hill. Soaz opens his eyes a bit confused, feeling pain all over his body. He laments in thought. Could this be his end, to become wolf food? Suddenly, he notices a shadow approaching. Imagining it to be the goblin, coming to finish what he started, he tries to stay awake, but his eyelids are heavy. We then see Soaz, injured and unconscious in the cold snow, as a small white ferret approaches him. The princess gazes at the man thoughtfully. She then touches his face with her small paw. Then, a strong green light emanates from the area, enveloping both of them. The scene cuts to a campfire lit inside a cave. Starting to regain consciousness, Soaz hears a feminine voice talking to someone. He wakes up still a bit lost. Trying to understand what is happening, he remembers falling from a cliff. He wonders if the voice belongs to his possible savior. Soaz begins to rise, determined to meet the one responsible for saving his life. But he feels a sharp pain in his shoulder. He touches his shoulder, groaning in pain, which catches the attention of Leonoel and Anna, who are talking. The two stare at Soaz with apprehension. Leonoel tells Anna that now that the human is awake, it is safer for her to leave. He, still not realizing that he is not alone in the cave, brings his hand to his head, complaining that his whole body hurts. Anna hides while Leonoel approaches the human. Soaz looks intrigued at the small white ferret that is staring at him. He asks the small creature if perhaps its owner saved him. While petting the ferret's head, he asks the animal if it is alone there, finding it strange because he was sure he had heard a woman's voice. Feeling a strong pang in his head, Soaz makes a sudden movement, bringing his hands to his head, which startles our little protagonist. She scolds the human, saying that he scared her as she thought he was going to hit her. Soaz, with his hands still on his head, is confused about where that feminine voice is coming from. He looks around, certain that he was the only human there. This frustrates our protagonist a bit. She looks at the man and says, "Can you hear me, can't you?" Soaz looks confused at the little ferret, but nods positively, confirming that he can hear him. Leonoel starts walking in circles, thoughtful. How can a human hear his voice? Maybe he isn't human. Surprised? Extremely thoughtful. Soaz tries to understand how it is possible for a ferret to be able to talk. But then, he realizes something. That in reality he is dreaming. Sure of his conclusion, he lies down again, trying to wake up from the dream. After all, what would explain a talking ferret? Leonoel, incredulous at the man's reaction, believes he is the type who prefers to deny things rather than believe his own eyes, or in this case, his own ears. She stands there staring at Soaz lying down, waiting for him to realize the reality. When out of nowhere, a loud growl coming from Soaz's stomach echoes in the cave, which makes him quite embarrassed. He feels the little animal moving away from him and opens one eye to peek at what is happening. The ferret returns with a kind of root in its mouth and tells Soaz to eat, because he is clearly hungry. After all, it has been 3 days since he was unconscious. 3 days? Says Soaz, sitting up, startled by such information. The little animal then explains that he was seriously injured after the fall, almost as if all the bones in his body had broken, and that he is lucky to still be alive. And arguing with the ferret, which honestly seems like a very crazy thing if you think that just a few minutes ago, our male lead didn't believe a ferret could talk. Soaz says that for someone who broke all their bones, he is feeling quite well, to be honest. He is truly incredulous at how that is possible. Our protagonist looks at him with a thoughtful and distant gaze. She tells us that the power that destroyed her country and diminished all her people into specks of dust is also the power that was able to save this man. Leonoel, for the first time in a long time, falls silent. She wonders why it is so hard to speak, as if the right words simply refuse to come out of her mouth. But deep down, she knows why. It is hard because it makes her remember the sins she committed that day. the sins she has been forced to relive in her mind over and over and over again for many years. Her truth, her sins, a burden that our noble protagonist has been cursed to carry. A burden that becomes even heavier when accompanied by immortality. After a few minutes of contemplation, she finally tells the man that she is actually a witch, and that is why she was able to save him. An uncomfortable silence hangs in the air as she reveals this, and Leonore clearly understands the reason for this. For this man, and for this world, magic is something that has not existed for many, many years. Seeing the man tremble, Leonore is certain that he believed not a word of what she said. But to her surprise, Soaz looks completely enchanted by her and sincerely asks her for an autograph. He starts desperately looking for something for her to sign, a piece of paper, anything. And our poor protagonist looks on confused by his reaction. Out of nowhere, he quickly starts taking off his clothes, telling her to sign on his back. A button on his shirt pops off with a quick movement, exposing his beautiful pectoral muscles and hitting our protagonist squarely in the head. She then starts yelling at him, telling him to stop being silly and that this way, undressing, he will freeze to death. And innocently, he argues that he has no paper for her to sign, and that he needs that autograph. She looks incredulously at him, questioning if he really believes her. And with a cute smile, he says, yes, that if she is a witch, then everything makes sense. In a very realistic way, Soaz says that no matter how much people said that all magic had disappeared from the world, he always believed that one day he would find a real wizard, and with an embarrassed smile, he looks at Leonore and says that he has now found what he had always dreamed of finding. She looks thoughtfully at him. In reality, she knows that magic has disappeared. What actually happened is that humans, afraid of destruction, decided to get rid of it, hiding it away forever. Still analyzing the situation, she notices something and asks the young man why he insists on calling a witch a wizard. Clearly a fan of Suarez, he is delighted to hear the comment. He asks the little ferret if it was really common for them to call wizards sorcerers back in the day, and the little animal seems not to understand what he is talking about. Entering study mode, Soaz explains that recently, he discovered that the official term used back then was sorcerer and not wizard. He continues chattering about historical facts, proud of himself for being a nerd in ancient history. Our protagonist, however, gets a bit annoyed, as she is indirectly being called an elder. After all, to her, it seems like all of this happened yesterday, even though deep down, she knows it has been a long time, over 1,000 years since magic disappeared, that no matter how much she wished, there is no way to stop time. Soaz notices that the ferret has stopped talking out of nowhere as if lost in thought. He sits on the ground and looks around, noticing something he had already observed earlier. All the human objects in that cave are ancient relics. Curious, he picks up one of the objects from the ground and wiping off some dirt, he notices an interesting pattern embedded in that object. Recognizing the pattern, he comments to the little animal that she must be a sorceress from Valhalla. Soaz looks excited, saying that out of all his studies on ancient civilizations, the civilization that interests him the most is the civilization of Valhalla, and that he is incredibly happy to be able to meet someone. The young man stops mid-sentence, realizing that something is wrong. He sees the little ferret still silent with a painful expression on her face. But the expression quickly changes, turning darker, with green and water-like eyes shining in the darkness of the cave. Soaz swallows hard, surprised, remembering the words of the chief of the hunters, that if at any moment he sees shining green and water-like eyes, he must run as fast as possible, because such eyes belong only to the white goblin. In a cold tone, she says, "I never planned to save you." And at that moment, Soaz remembers the vision he had while falling off the cliff. The little ferret continues, saying with disdain that humans, including him, invaded the mountains of Agobes, an important place for her, a place that welcomed her when she was lost and alone. And she, more than anyone, knows the wickedness and greed of humans, for she was once human too. She is sure they invaded that forest to hunt various animals again. But unlike her, he does not know what it is like to hear the cries of pain from foxes and other animals that lost their mothers, fathers, and siblings just because of a whim, and that the only reason she saved him is because he is the king of these selfish humans, and only he has the power to put an end to this indiscriminate slaughter. Soaz kneels in front of her, asking for forgiveness. He looks at Leonore seriously, taking responsibility for the misfortune. He acknowledges that his lack of virtue as a king is the true cause, and firmly declares that he will take full responsibility and resolve the situation. Leonore, in a cold and distant tone, says she is relieved that he understood so quickly. She orders him that as soon as he returns to the city, he must never set foot on those lands again. She continued, demanding an end to that meaningless massacre. She declared that she did not wish to hurt anyone, but made it clear that if something like that happened again, she would not forgive. Still bent over, Soaz placed his hand on his chest as a sign of promise and affirmed that he understood and would fulfill what was ordered of him. But he says a bit embarrassed, "If you can't give me an autograph? Maybe a handshake then?" Leonol is surprised by Soaz's clueless comment. No matter how clueless the request is, Soaz is serious as he looks at the ferret with a puppy dog look, pleading please. Leonol finally gives in and shakes Soaz's hand. Soaz celebrates the handshake, saying that finally his dreams have come true. Leonol just watches, thinking that he seemed like such a normal person but apparently has some loose wires in his head. Still excited, he thanks the little animal again, promising that he will never wash his hand. And she looks at him, scolding him for not thinking about washing his hands. Soaz then asks what her name is, and convinced that it is better not to reveal her full name, she says he can call her Noel. With a cute smile, he then says that she can call him Soaz. Hearing his name, Noel comments that his name sounds like a perfect name for a fairy. Curious, she asks what the meaning of his name is. A bit embarrassed, he explains that it has no meaning and that nowadays it is not common for people to give meanings to names. Incredulous at how the world has become colder, Leonol remembers that her name was given to her by her mother, and it means elegant green light green. But since she is hiding her identity from Soaz, she believes it is unnecessary to tell him this information. Noticing how incredulous the little ferret was, Soaz comments that the kingdom of Palirod is quite attached to traditions, so many people have names with meanings. Noel is surprised to realize that he is the king of the kingdom of Palirod. She approaches him and gives him light, comforting pats on the leg. This makes the heart of our poor male lead race for a moment, while in reality, Noel seems to only feel pity for him for being the king of Palirod. A very, very long time ago, she heard rumors that a new kingdom had been created in the ruins of Valhalla. Leonol was surprised at the time when she heard about it, as the region had its climate altered as a side effect of the magic used in the battle. And because of this, the region suffered from an almost eternal winter. She remembers thinking that regardless of who decided to create a kingdom there, she feels pity for that person. But she never imagined she would be face to face with the king from there. Feeling a bit guilty, since she was the main culprit for the magic and the climate, she promises to take care of Soaz while he is in the mountains. A few days pass. Still in the cave, Leonol throws a root in Soaz's direction, telling him to eat it. He looks a bit disappointed to have to eat roots once again. Noticing his pout, Noel irritably says that he has no idea how difficult it is to find food in the middle of winter. He argues that he understands, but all he has eaten in the last few days has been roots and tree bark. Noel decides that Soaz's complaint was the last straw. She stands up and starts heading towards him, determined to teach him a lesson. She jumps on him, demanding the root back since he doesn't want it. Soaz dodges Noel's advances, saying he never said he wouldn't eat. Our protagonist is trembling with anger at the young man's ingratitude and audacity. Trying to deal with our protagonist's cute fury, Soaz changes the subject, commenting on why she never eats anything. He noticed that since he arrived, he hasn't seen her eat. This makes Leonol calm down a bit and becomes somewhat thoughtful. Lowering her ears a bit sadly, she says she also doesn't know why. When she woke up, she had already become a ferret. And since then, she has never felt hunger. She also became incapable of dying. Almost in a whisper, she says that this is quite an unfortunate thing. Soaz worries about her and can feel the sadness in her voice. He extends his hand to touch her head as a way to comfort her. But before she can touch, Leonol shouts, "But you... Not only do you give zero value to my suffering, but you are also being picky about eating. You spoiled child," she concludes while pulling Soaz's hair. After her fury passes, she sits on Soaz's head, while he, in thought, worries about the fact that he might faint from lack of nutrition. While thinking that he needs something edible if he doesn't want to starve, Soaz remembers Shilas and how happy he was with the beef jerky, which makes him remember something else. He runs to where his coat is and starts looking for something. Until he finds a small pouch, Leonol recognizes the pouch immediately. She jumps off Soaz's head and runs towards the corner of the cave. Just like the young man a moment ago, she also starts looking for something. She picks up an empty little bag, throws it on the ground, and sarcastically tells Soaz to inform his knight that she loved the beef jerky. Somewhere far away, Shillas is crying over his stolen beef jerky. Seeing the pouch, Soaz concludes that his suspicions that the birds were informants were indeed correct. Leonoel, who had gone closer to Soaz, smells a sweet scent coming from the pouch he took from his coat. Salivating with anticipation, she concludes that it is apple jelly cookies. Very excited, wagging her tail, she asks Soaz to hurry up and give her what is inside the pouch. Soaz is hit hard by the cuteness of our protagonist. He clears his throat, trying to regain his composure. Soaz then says that he can't just give it to her and suggests that they make a deal. Since she hasn't eaten cookies in over 1,000 years, he says he will give her the cookies in exchange for a piece of meat. Noel is tempted by the proposal because the wolves probably have meat, but she doesn't know if they would help a human. Soaz holds Leonoel in her lap, commenting that no matter how much he thanks her for trying to feed him, he has been feeling very weak due to poor nutrition, and he needs something more nutritious than a cookie. Okay, I will get meat for you, says Leonoel in a very loud voice, seeing the drama that Soaz is making, but at the same time understanding his point. She says she will visit the wolves to get the meat, but asks him to wait for her there. But the young man says he would like to accompany her because he wants to apologize to the wolves. Worried, she warns that the wolves might attack him because they are angry. With a tender smile, he says he is aware of that and is willing to face the consequences. His common sense and words surprise Leonoel, but she looks seriously at him, saying that she does not take responsibility for what might happen. For the first time in a few days, Soaz leaves the cave. He is impressed by the beauty of the forest in winter. What do you think? Asks Leonoel a little proudly. Nature is too beautiful, isn't it? She concludes with a rhetorical question. Just a note. At some moments, the protagonist appears in human form, even though she is still a ferret. I believe this is just to better illustrate the scene, but in the narrative, she continues to be a ferret. When this changes, I will let you know, okay? Soaz looks around and agrees with Noel. She asks him to follow her. They walk for some time through the snow-covered forest. Soaz notices how serene and beautiful the forest is. He mentally scolds himself for almost having destroyed such a beautiful and peaceful place. Soaz is pulled from his thoughts by Noel, impatiently saying that if he keeps walking so slowly, she will leave him. The young man then quickens his pace. They walk for a good while. Soaz cannot help but feel curious about Noel, especially because something inside him cannot stop wondering if Noel is she. The eyes, the name, the relics of Valhalla, everything screams to him that the little ferret that saved him is actually the last princess of Valhalla, Glasha Leonoel. Concluding this, more questions invade Soaz's mind. Why did she become a ferret? Why can he hear her? Why can she only use healing magic? And wasn't it lonely to be alone all these years? Noticing the silence, Noel turns to him and asks if he is so quiet because he is already tired. Still thoughtful, Soaz believes it is not the right time to ask her all this. So in a teasingly comic tone, he says that she keeps calling him skinny, but in reality, he has a nice body if she looks closely. As he says this, he exposes a bit of his chest, teasing her. Ignoring his charm, Noel looks at him worriedly and ignores his charm. Can you read my thoughts? She questions incredulously. Soaz assures her that he cannot, but she was murmuring that he was a skinny weakling for most of the way. The two continue walking, but this time they talk along the way, until something in front of them makes them stop. Cedric appears in front of them, making Soaz surprised to see how big and majestic the wolf is. Growling at the human, Cedric questions Noel, how she had the courage to betray the trust of the wolves by bringing a human there. Cedric shows his fangs and is ready to attack. Leonoel raises her paw, asking Cedric to calm down, because she would never bring a threat close to her pack, and she does not want to ask him to trust the human but to trust her. Cedric stares at Leonoel for a second. He sighs and concedes, affirming that he trusts the princess. After calming the situation, Leonoel turns to Soaz and asks if he can hear Cedric's voice, but Soaz shakes his head negatively. Our protagonist, realizing that she will have to be the interpreter, officially introduces Soaz as the king of humans and Cedric as the leader of the Grey Wolves. She explains that Cedric helped her bring him to the cave when he fell from the cliff. Hearing this, Soaz bows and thanks Cedric while Noel translates everything. With introductions out of the way, she apologizes for asking this, but questions if by any chance he could share a bit of meat with the human. Cedric, still wary of the human, says he can share but still does not trust the young man, that at any moment he could betray the princess and go down the mountain to fetch the hunters. Although Soaz does not understand what Cedric is saying, just his look is enough to send chills down his spine. In defense of Soaz, Noel explains that he wouldn't be capable of doing that she spent enough time with him to realize he is not that kind of person. Leonel's words leave the young man emotional. But when he hears her talking about the foxes, Soaz's expression changes. He knows he was partially to blame for this and decides that he has to try to talk to Cedric directly. Soaz takes a deep breath and then begins to speak. I heard that you are talking about what happened with the foxes. It was me who gave those orders, so I cannot say I didn't know about it. I also know that it is something I will never be forgiven for. But I promise I will ban all further hunting in the Agobis Mountains, and those who do not abide will face severe punishment. I do not dare ask for your forgiveness, but I beg that you give me one final chance to prove that I will never let such a disaster happen again. Soaz finishes his sincere speech and bows to Cedric, listening to the words of the young king. Cedric says something to the princess, and she just nods her head. She approaches Soaz, saying that he should thank Cedric since he decided to share some of the meat with him. Soaz is surprised that his words have reached Cedric. He looks at Cedric and thanks him for the kindness. Cedric nods and goes to fetch the meat for Soaz. As soon as he returns and hands the huge piece of meat to the young man, he thanks him again. Leonel, teasing a bit, asks if he at least knows how to cook. The young king assures that all the men of Palirod know how to cook. Still poking at Soaz, Leonel jokes that he hopes this is true because it would be a shame for such a large piece of meat to be ruined. Cedric observes the two interacting and can't help but notice that this is the first time he sees the princess so animated, concluding that she must have missed human interaction a lot. Meanwhile, in the village of Konut, a carriage has just arrived in a hurry. A man rushes down, running towards the royal knight. Shilos von Rodon, you abandoned your king and returned alone. How dare you do this and still consider yourself a royal guard? Yells Shilos' uncle as he clenches his fist towards the knight's face. Pow! The uncle's fist lands squarely on Shilos, and the impact causes him to fall to the ground. This wonderful man who did what this narrator wanted to do a few good chapters ago is named Davide von Ehrenken, and he is a Duke of Palirod. And he tells us that he came running as soon as he heard that the king was missing. Shilos, not denying the fact that he abandoned his king, complains to his uncle, worried about being publicly humiliated. This infuriates David even more. In silence, he pulls out his advisor's sword while Shilos watches the scene, concerned. Shilos starts to run, and his uncle chases him, brandishing the sword, ready to destroy him. The advisor just shakes his head negatively, watching the scene. The tempers calm slightly, and we see Shilos kneeling while Davide grumbles incredulously about his nephew's ingratitude, after years of raising him with care and love since he was a child. Davide walks in circles, anxious and worried about his king. Shilos irritably comments that he knows the king and that he will survive. Davide throws a mace, basically telling him to shut up. With tears in his eyes, Davide argues that important monsters live in that mountain. Massaging the spot where he was hit, Shilos agrees with his uncle. But still, he knows that Soaz will be fine. It's not the first time something like this has happened. Apparently, the young king is a true magnet for trouble, but somehow, he always comes out alive in the end. He asks his uncle to trust his intuition, for Shilos is sure that the king is alive. Comforting Davide, he explains that besides that, now that the weather has improved, they can go back to searching for the king. Meanwhile, in the mountains, Soaz has just eaten a feast. He is in ecstasy, with a full stomach, warm and with Noel by his side. Everything is perfect. Soaz picks up the little ferret in his hand, asking if maybe he should just live there forever. But Noel mocks him, saying that he wouldn't survive. He lies down, placing Noel on his belly while complaining that she is being very cruel. But she just says she is stating the obvious. The warmth of Soaz's body combined with the softness of his skin makes Noel feel very comfortable. This makes her start to feel quite sleepy. Soaz begins to pet the little animal lying on his chest while asking if he can ask her something. Sleepy and comfortable, Noel says that whatever it is can wait until she wakes up. But Soaz insists, saying it's just a question. Getting a bit irritated with the insistence, Noel asks him to spit it out already. Did you know that only the royal family of Valhalla has aquamarine eyes? He questions. The question makes Noel awaken in surprise, and the two fall silent for a moment. Glasha Leonoel, it's you, isn't it? Soaz questions, breaking the silence. Realizing how shrewd Soaz is and that it would be in vain to deny it, Leonoel simply confirms. Soaz stands up and starts shaking Leonoel's little paws, and she asks what the hell he is doing. With a cute smile, he just says he is happy to have met her. Noel looks at him irritated. She feels like screaming just by looking at his smile. Noticing the irritated aura coming from Noel, Soaz comments that it must be hard to stay angry at him after looking at his angelic face. But this seems to irritate Noel even more, causing her to pull her paws from Soaz's hands, giving him a slap in the process. Sad, he questions if it's really that bad that he knows her. Trembling with a mix of anger and anxiety, Leonore tells Soaz that of course it's strange. After all, it's been 1,000 years since she destroyed Valhalla and erased her existence along with the kingdom she loved so much. And there shouldn't be any trace of her existence in these lands. Grabbing her paws again and spinning in animated circles, Noel says he saw a painting of her. Leonore is surprised by this, wondering if perhaps he found it in another country. Soaz explains that some ruins of Valhalla still exist in the far north of Palirod, in a region where there is no winter and the warm, humid spring flourishes. He recalls that the first thing he did when he became king was to go to that place. And he remembers being surprised by the heat, by the greenery, and by the beautiful flowers, the ruins of Hydron, the capital of the ancient kingdom of Valhalla, the only place where magic still exists. He knew he needed to see the place of the stories he heard as a child, a place that, having never seen, he had already learned to love, just like magic itself. Soaz is pulled from his nostalgia by Leonoel's surprise at knowing that ruins of Valhalla still exist. He smiles at her, confirming it, which leaves her even more perplexed. Fondly recalling, he explains that a large part of the city was destroyed, but half of the Hymidian library remained intact. The basement, in particular, is a place that held many books, and it was there that he found the portrait of Leonore. And thanks to that library, he was able to research and study a lot about Valhalla. While Soaz speaks, Noel seems not to be listening. She appears to be lost in thought while sounding cold, realizing that if there are ruins, then it means the destruction failed, that her magic didn't work. She denies this thought. It can't be true because if it is, and the magic failed, then it means she destroyed her own country for nothing? Is this the price I have to pay for using forbidden magic? Leonore questions in her thoughts. Meanwhile, Soaz, concerned, waves his hand in front of her, trying to bring her back to reality. But Noel's mind is racing, being forced to stay trapped in this useless little ferret body, and forever having to witness the sins of her failure. In despair, she concludes that this is a curse. Overcome by pain, she wishes she could disappear at that moment. Meanwhile, Soaz, seeing the small animal trembling in fear, picks her up in his arms, not understanding what is happening. He thought she would be happy to hear that something from her kingdom still exists. Why does she seem so scared? He strokes Noel's head while trying to calm her, telling her to relax, that everything is okay, and he didn't mean to scare her. But his attempt seems in vain, as the little ferret continues to tremble in his arms with a distant look. In her thoughts, Noel realizes something. If the magic failed, then he might be alive? She remembers the image of the wizard she sacrificed everything to destroy. Noel knows that if he is alive, there would be no chance this world would be so peaceful. She concludes that maybe this means she hasn't completely failed. And this gives her a bit of strength to compose herself. Swallowing hard and trying to ignore the tightness in her heart, Noel comes back to herself and jumps off Soaz's lap. And he, concerned, asks if she is okay, explaining that she was trembling a lot and he was scared to see her like that. Noel only responds with a dry, "I'm fine." Changing the subject, she asks the young king what the state of the Hymidian library is. Soaz replies that perhaps because of the magic, the books are in good condition. Noel sits on the floor, thoughtful about Soaz's answer. He sits next to her, asking if she would like to go to Hymidian. She quickly says yes, that she is curious to see what kinds of records are there. Upon hearing this, Noel begins to comment on something he just remembered, but then pauses mid-sentence. Trying to disguise it, he says that it's actually nothing. But Noel, noticing that he is hiding something, she looks at him with a serious expression and asks him what he did. Avoiding eye contact, he comments that maybe she will be angry with him. Hearing this, she presses him further to speak. Soaz begins to explain that he was worried about the precious books. "You don't tell me that," Noel questions anxiously. Soaz continues explaining that he took all the books to the castle just to ensure that nothing would happen to them. Noel is shocked and questions, "All the books? You took them all?" He said he took all that were in good condition. Sadly, some were quite destroyed. Noel asks how many books exactly he took. With a carefree smile, he replies that it was 100,000 books. You are crazy. Noel screams in surprise. She cannot understand how he managed to move so many books. He can't even use magic. Teasing her a bit, he retorts that she can't either. On the defensive, she replies that she can heal. Soaz then explains that the ruins are not very far from the castle, so it wasn't that difficult for the soldiers who carried the books to the castle. Incredulous, Noel says that he really is something. Soaz blushes and thanks her for the compliment, but she quickly huffs, saying it wasn't a compliment. Returning to the subject, Noel asks what types of books were in the library. Thoughtfully, he replies that most were basic theoretical books. For example, books that explained how to draw magical circles. It seems he didn't find that. Thanks, Noel. Still thoughtful, she concludes that if the basement is still intact, then that might be there. Only with her body unable to use magic properly, she might not be able to open the way. She knows she needs to try, as she believes that it might be able to end her miserable existence. Determined, Noel asks Soaz if she can do her a favor. He gives a confident smile and kneels in front of Leonoel, showing that he is ready to serve her. She extends her hand, helping Soaz to stand up. And looking directly into his eyes, she asks him to take her to Hymedion. Soaz gives a confident smile, showing he is very happy to be able to help the princess of Valhalla. Looking at her small and delicate paws, Soaz tells Noel that she needs to remember that she is a ferret. The protagonist looks at him confused. Blushing, he explains that she is so cute that it's making his heart hurt. With a sincere smile, Soaz says he would do anything for her. Despite this, he is curious about why she wants to go to Hymedion, since all the relics and books have already been transported to the castle. He then asks if there is a secret room there or something like that in Hymedion. Noticing the intelligence and insight of the young king, Noel says that she would definitely have hired him as her assistant back when she was a princess. Noel hands a cloth to Soaz. He questions what that cloth is for, and she says she will pack the bags and he will help. Excited, he asks where he should start. Noel lies on the floor, making it clear that she does not intend to lift a finger to help, and then begins to command Soaz. But he doesn't seem to mind, and he starts gathering things. While Noel looks bored, she then tells Soaz that she is curious about something. He says she can feel free to ask whatever she wants. Pausing, she begins to speak. Well, I tried to hurt you. I put your life at risk. You don't hate me for that? Silence dominates the environment for a few seconds. Then, still arranging things, unshaken, he says, how could he hate her if he likes her? Soaz's words make our protagonist embarrassed, and she coughs out of nowhere. Worried, he stops arranging things to see if she is okay. Still in a coughing fit, she asks, what is wrong with him? What kind of human likes ferrets? He approaches her, gently patting her back and reminds her that she is not just a ferret. And even if she were, it's not the ferret he likes. He likes Glasha Leonoel. Still embarrassed, she says that he speaks things very shamelessly. What's wrong with saying that I like the things I like? He replies with a smile, and that he would feel this way, regardless of how she looked. In the past, he always imagined what kind of person she would be while observing her painting. He thought she would be a somewhat more serious person, but she is a bit more persistent than he imagined. And he likes that. It's as if she were dominating him. Awkwardly, Noel tries to change the subject while looking at Soaz's beautiful blushing face. She notices his beautiful hair. Curiously, she comments that now that she has noticed, she has never seen that hair color before. And the color of his eyes is also different from his hair. She questions whether the disappearance of magic caused any effect on people's bodies. Not understanding, he comments that he never thought much about it, and questions whether this was considered strange in the time of Valhalla. She nods positively, saying that in the past everyone had the same hair and eye color. And although she knows quite a few people, she had never seen hair the color of melted silver. Touching his hair, he explains that it's quite common for people nowadays to have different colored hair and eyes, but only his family has that hair color. Noel messes up his hair, saying that then he is the odd one out. He complains a bit for being called strange. Stammering a little, Noel comments only to compliment him. Soaz, at times suspicious, is sure it's not just that. Clearly hiding something, she jumps off his lap, saying that they need to go because Emma is waiting. Who is Emma? The young man questions. Oh, so you didn't even know her name? Giving a wide smile, she just asks him to follow her. It is already dusk as they leave the cave. They walk hurriedly through the trees until they reach an open area where a horse seems to be waiting for them. Seeing Soaz's surprise, Noel explains to me that she was as injured as he was, but still stayed by his side. Seeing this, she decided to save him so they could return home together. And that now, Eme was recovered. Soaz recalls the moment he fell from the cliff. He realized that the horse wasn't moving and imagined that the worst had happened. With an emotional tone, he calls for his horse Eme. And when she looks in his direction, he says he is happy that she is safe and sound. And he apologizes for not even knowing her name when she saved his life. Noel, who is watching all of this proudly with a beautiful gathering, notices something strange, Eme. The horse is trembling all over. Emi kicks the ground, propelling her body upward, and Noel, worried, shouts for Soaz to get away. The horse lunges towards Soaz, and a loud crash is heard. The horse lunges towards the young man, and soon after, a loud crash is heard. Soaz barely manages to dodge the horse, but Emi remains agitated, thrashing and stomping in place. Trying to survive the stomps, Noel looks breathlessly at the animal, angry, saying that this reaction only shows how ignorant that animal is. But upon observing the horse more closely, in reality, Emi is extremely emotional because her master called her by name. Realizing this, Noel takes a deep breath and then shouts for Eme to calm down. And then the horse stops her celebratory dance. Eme apologizes, saying she got too excited and let herself get carried away. She remembers almost hitting Soaz. Quickly, Eme kneels, asking for forgiveness from her king. The horse's movement causes a pile of snow to fall, covering the little ferret. After digging itself out of the snow mound, Noel realizes that something. While Soaz approaches to check if the little animal is okay after the snow attack, Noel asks Emi if she likes Soaz. Confirming Noel's suspicion, the mare quickly asks Noel to speak softly, but Leonoel reassures her, explaining that Soaz can't hear them. Emi looks at Soaz, blushing. She asks if he is listening and just pretending not to hear. Noel assures her that Soaz is not the type of person who spies on others. Of course not, he would never do that, Emi retorts. She recalls when Soaz chose her, and the stableman tried to dissuade him from the choice, saying that the horse he chose was actually a mare, and that he should choose another one. But to his surprise, the young king rebutted the man's words, saying that it didn't matter, and continued saying that a horse just needs to run well. The man has to argue a little more. It's just that Soaz didn't listen to him. He had already made his choice and was going to take that mare. Then he smiled at his new mare, saying it was a pleasure to meet her. Eme remembers being very happy, enchanted by the kindness and wisdom of the young king. Returning from her thoughts, she tells Noel that His Majesty is a very kind and sincere person. Leonoel smiles, agreeing with Eme, saying that is exactly the kind of person Soaz is, and that she shouldn't be ashamed and should go to her master, and that from today he will call her Eme as he finally knows her name. Noel calls Soaz, who is waiting for the conversation between the girls. She explains that he can approach and that Eme is calm now. Worried, he asks if she is still hurt from the fall and if that's why she acted that way. Noel reassures him, saying that she is fine and that he shouldn't worry. Soaz then calmly approaches the mare. He caresses the animal's face, calling her by the name Emma with affection and concern in his voice. Soaz then rests his forehead against hers, somewhat apologizing for having made her go through. That he looks at Noel and asks her to be his spokesperson and tell Eme that he is very sorry for having made her hurt. Noel explains that this won't be necessary because animals raised by humans can understand what they say, and that she has already understood his apologies and is actually very happy to be able to ride with him again. She drew a grand magical circle on the ground. The young king sighs, slightly irritated, asking if he needs to take off his shirt again so she can see his muscles. Noel replies that he doesn't, stepping away from the two, content with the little provocation. Soaz asks where she is going, and Noel replies that she is going home. Confused, he questions about the cave. Wasn't that her home? Noel explains that the cave was just an easy place for the wolves to find, and that her true home was at the top of that tree. She then asks him to wait a moment and quickly climbs to the top of the large tree and enters a small hole in the trunk. A few minutes later, she pokes her head out of the hole and asks if he can see that. Around her neck is a delicate golden metal chain. Soaz questions what that is around her neck. Without answering his question, Noel asks how much he knows about her. Confidently, he says that there is no one in the world who knows more about her than he does. Noel can't hide her slight discomfort with his comment. Noticing her expression, he explains that it is just an innocent passion, based on academic studies. But why does she ask that? Climbing down from the tree, Noel says she thought it would be better for him to show this to her before they go down to the city. And considering how much she knows about the history of Valhalla, Maybe he would recognize the object, so Oz analyzes the chain around her neck, saying he has never seen a metal like that before, which is neither gold nor silver. She replies that, honestly, she also doesn't know exactly what that necklace is, and that unfortunately, her kingdom was destroyed before she could find out. Noel questions if Soaz really has no idea what it could be. And if she gives a hint, saying that the necklace is a treasure brought to this world by the first sorcerer, maybe that will make him associate it with something. Upon hearing that, the young king swallows hard, imagining that it could be, yes, that necklace was the origin of all magic. Lionel says, confirming Soaz's suspicions. That necklace was the famous oyster brought to this world by the first sorceress, the soul of the gods, the origin of all magic. This, here, is the treasure coveted by the evil sorcerer. She insists, asking what else he knows about the necklace. Soaz explains that he remembers it being mentioned in a book, but he had no idea what it looked like. Proudly, Noel reinforces that the necklace is a true treasure. Thanks to it, people are able to learn how to use magic. But unfortunately, also thanks to it, Valhalla was destroyed. Soaz begins to say that he already knows about that, but becomes thoughtful. He wonders if he should tell her about the fairy tale and how it also explains how she met her end worried, remembering how shocked she was to hear about the ruins of Valhalla. If she knows that people are aware of her tragic story and read it to their children before bed like a simple bedtime story. Soaz realizes he can't do that to her. He loses the courage to tell her. Noticing that Soaz suddenly stopped talking, she questions what he was saying. Disguising his embarrassment, he says he should have known this, but unfortunately didn't. Awkwardly, he says he should know her better than anyone, and asks her to please talk more about herself and the necklace. Leonore feels a bit awkward with the young king's sincere display of feelings. She thoughtfully touches the necklace, commenting on the story of when Valhalla officially became a kingdom. In the past, the northern lands were so poor that even having a simple pair of shoes was difficult. The people fought tirelessly against hunger and cold. But one day, a sorceress descended upon those lands wearing a sea-green necklace. She was the first sorceress to appear, and the first ruler of the kingdom of Valhalla, Glasha Altrasega. To the people, she was like a goddess, a blessing from the heavens. Seeing the northern humans suffering from the cold and nearing their end, Altra decided she would share her magic with them, to save them. She drew a grand magical circle on the ground. She tore off the necklace she wore and placed it in the center of the circle. In an instant, the magic spread across all the lands. After tinting the entire world with a sea-green light, it allowed all living beings to learn magic. And there, Altra was able to teach the people many different things: culture, skills, magic, and much more. And all of this was only possible thanks to the power of Ostra. But Ostra had too much power, and some began to covet the necklace, which ultimately led to the destruction of the kingdom that Altra had created with such care. After hearing everything, Soaz asks how the necklace is with her. Noel also finds this strange, but she explains that when she woke up, the necklace chain was near her. For some reason, the chain and the watchmaker's stone were separated after the use of the destruction magic. The watchmaker's stone is the name given to the stone that serves as the pendant of the necklace. And the reason it has this name is only told to those who inherit the throne of Valhalla. But since Leonore never took on the role of queen, she never knew the reason. Since the chain is still intact, the most obvious assumption is that the stone is also somewhere. Soaz becomes worried, knowing that this means the origin of the magic is lost somewhere. But Noel doesn't seem worried. She explains that as long as the chain and stone are not together, the stone is nothing more than a beautiful gem. After all, 1,000 years have passed since they were separated, and if nothing happened, it's because it has been with the chain all this time. Leonore looks thoughtfully at the sky when she says this. You see, there is no chance that I wouldn't feel the energy of Ostra if the necklace were complete. Because no matter how strange Soaz might find it to believe, she has been taking care of the necklace since she was 6 years old. After saying this, Leonore starts to laugh a lot, but a strange laugh as if she feels uncomfortable. And Soaz notices this and becomes worried. He picks up the small ferret and hugs her. He gives her a gentle kiss on the forehead as if trying to comfort her and says she doesn't need to act like everything is okay. Noel makes a sad expression, letting her feelings take over. Trying to change the mood of the conversation, she complains that she never imagined she would be comforted by a child like him. Soaz feels a bit upset about being treated like a child and wonders mentally when he will start to see him as a man. He asks her if what they have gathered is everything, or if they need to get something else to take. Noel confirms that this is all. and that now she just needs to say goodbye to the wolves, and then they can leave. Noel is surprised for a minute, seeing the image of someone who has been gone for a long time. She rubs her eyes, wondering if she is really seeing Dalmia. Soaz is confused by her reaction and calls her name as if wanting to know if everything is okay. Not understanding why she suddenly remembered Dalmia, Noel composes herself and informs Soaz that they will leave tomorrow morning, so they should sleep early tonight. A little later that same day, a no, in the form of a mournful howl, echoes from inside the cave. Cedric's pups cry out, asking the princess not to leave. Cedric tries to discipline his pups by saying that the princess has already made her decision and that it is not up to them to question or ask her to stay. Anna endures her partner's speech and says that they should say goodbye to the princess with a smile on their faces. Still tearful, the pups listen to their parents and say goodbye, asking the princess not to forget them and that she can always come back whenever she wants. With a smile, Noel assures them that she will not forget them and that she cares a lot for all of them. Soaz arrives and reminds her that it is time to go. They leave, and Noel asks that if anything happens, they write to her. But how are they going to write to her when they are just wolves? I think the princess forgot this little detail. They begin to descend the mountain, and Leonore comments on something that she finds strange. It has been a few days since Soaz disappeared. How come no one has come to look for him? He replies that this is because the only soldier he brought with him on this expedition has zero loyalty. Oh, still, you must have a little money with you, right? You will be able to find your way back without any problems, Leonore says a bit awkwardly and worried. Soaz responds that the soldier they brought was responsible for taking care of all the money. An uncomfortable silence hangs in the air for a few seconds. Noel breaks the silence, worried if Soaz will really be okay returning to a kingdom that did not send anyone to look for him. And if he wants, they can return to the top of the mountain. Soaz explains that aside from Shilas, all his other subjects are loyal. Noel does not seem very convinced, certain that by now the news of the king's disappearance must have reached the castle. A bird quickly approaches the two, informing the princess that an emergency is happening, and that she must return as quickly as possible to the mountains. Noel, surprised, asks the bird what is happening, and it explains that an army of armed men is climbing the mountain. What? Noel questions in panic. The bird continues, saying that the worst part is that Cedric decided to confront the army. He ordered the bird to help him gather his pack so that together they could go after the humans. Leonore gets irritated with the terrible timing of things, and poor Soaz watches, not understanding what is happening since he cannot hear what the bird is saying. Noel orders Soaz to mount Emme because they need to go quickly, and she will explain what is happening on the way. Emme gallops quickly up the mountain. Soaz, after being informed of what was happening, is impressed by the number of soldiers, and Noel says she believes they are probably looking for Soaz, and that the one leading the army is a robust and older man. Hearing the description, Soaz deduces that it is Duke Arrington who is the leader, which is concerning because he tends to be a bit extreme when it comes to the king. So if he ends up finding the wolves, Soaz does not have the courage to finish saying what will happen if the Duke is not stopped. He asks Emme to go as fast as possible because they need to warn the Duke at all costs. As soon as he spots a soldier, he shouts for them to stop and that he is safe. But the Duke cannot hear him, especially since his attention is focused on the furious pack of wolves in front of him. Soaz and Noel advance through the trees, able to see that a confrontation between humans and wolves is about to happen. Noel then tries to shout for the wolves to retreat, but her shouts are in vain, and she realizes that no one is hearing them since they must still be far away. She becomes quite worried. A massacre is going to happen. She pleads with Soaz for an idea of what to do. He thinks he has an idea that might work. Soaz asks her to shout. Shout how? Noel questions, confused about how this could help. The howl of the white goblin. Soaz is sure this will stop them. Understanding the young king's plan, Leonore asks him to cover his ears. She fills her small ferret lungs with air, and as soon as Emme stops running, she lets the air out, emitting a loud and high-pitched sound. The humans are confused and stunned by the scream, but Shilas recognizes the scream, desperately telling the others that it is the White Goblin, a terrible monster that inhabits those mountains, the same monster with sea-green eyes that attacked them on the day of the king's disappearance. Shilas begins to plead with his uncle to order everyone to retreat. Shilas's pleas only irritate the Duke further, who orders the soldiers to prepare their weapons. He shouts in the direction from where the goblin's scream came, challenging it, when out of nowhere a blade comes from that direction and cuts the air right in front of the Duke. sticking forcefully into the ground in front of the Duke. This catches his attention, making him look at the object that just barely missed him. He quickly analyzes the dagger and realizes that it belongs to the king. Shillis is happy to hear this, assuming it means that the king is alive. Returning to run after the shout, Soaz and Leonoel finally approach the group. M jumps out from among the trees. Soaz and Noel order everyone to stop. The two remain there between the two groups, looking at them angrily. Cedric and the Duke are surprised by their arrival. Noel dismounts from the horse and begins to walk towards the wolves. Soaz follows him. The Duke gets excited, certain that now that Soaz has arrived, the fight will be easier until he realizes that the king is heading towards the wolves, and this surprises him. Soaz in front of the pack asks the soldiers to lower their weapons and show respect. The Duke questions, saying that the wolves tried to harm the king. He probably knows this from what Shillis and the hunters reported. Cedric shows his fingers to the Duke, retaliating against his hostility. Soaz takes a more incisive stance, saying that what he said is not a request but an order. The Duke hesitates for a moment, but then drops his sword, obeying his king's order. Cedric, observing this, comments to Noel that she was indeed right, and Soaz really seems to be the right person to put an end to their problem with the humans. Noel boasts a little, questioning if she has ever been wrong. "Truly, princess, you have never been wrong," says Cedric with a smile. She pokes her old friend, and observing things calming down, she reminds Cedric that now that everything is peaceful, she needs to go. Leonoel, with a warm smile on his face, stated that there was no need for a second farewell. She asks him and his pack to take care, and that she will always be thinking of them. Cedric realizes that the princess really does not intend to return to the mountains. She seems to have finally found her path. But for a long time, she was the protector of Agobis, the immortal princess who defended those in need. Cedric and all his pack bow in respect to Leonoel, a way of saying goodbye and thanking her for everything she did for those mountains and the animals that live there. The scene cuts to the next day. A man hammering something? A man hammers something. A sign in the village of Kunut being put up by royal order while some villagers watch curiously. They approach as soon as the sign is finished being placed. The sign says that the white goblin was severely injured and therefore hid deep in the mountains, all thanks to the brave soldiers of the kingdom. But he is still alive, and we cannot guarantee that the mountains are safe. Therefore, we will immediately close all hunting camps and prohibit all entry into the mountains of Agobis. "Oh, frankly, you dare describe me as a monster," says Noel, a bit irritated. Soaz explains that he only did this because it was the best way to keep people away from the mountains. But the little ferret does not seem convinced. She questions what will happen to the hunters. Will they really respect a warning? After all, they lost their jobs overnight. Soaz explains that since he was already starting another project, he decided to give the hunters a new job. He needed strong men, so it ended up being a good opportunity. With a smile, he simply replies that the kingdom of Palarod needed something to export. After all, Kryberg demanded furs as tribute. But that was not a real tribute, just an excuse to cover up something else. The furs were hard to come by and were not a sustainable resource. Thus, at the moment, they could no longer meet the demands. Soaz pauses his speech and looks at the knife in his hand. He then plunges the knife into his portion. Waiting for one of the meals, Leonoel gets irritated to find out that the country of Axokus asked for animal skins for this reason. She remembers that in the past, the country of Axokus loved peace. Incredible that a country that loved peace and knew how to value the land did something so disgusting. Soaz comments that he does not know why. But the country of Axokus has always coveted the ruins of Valhalla. Knowing this irritates our protagonist even more. But all the commotion and movement of the carriage makes her feel nauseous. And, well, she puts everything out, if you know what I mean. Soaz helps her, placing her on his lap and begins to stroke her soft fur. Rocking her like a baby, he scolds her for fidgeting so much and ending up feeling nauseous. Still a bit dizzy, she comments that if she could use magic, they would have arrived already, and she wouldn't have felt unwell. But unfortunately, she is just a little ferret. Trying to cheer her up, Soaz comments that thanks to the roads built by Valhalla, they can reach the kingdom faster. While holding her close to the window so she can observe the landscape, he mentions that he has plans to start his own paper production business. That thanks to a book he found in Hymedion, he can start everything. He learned to make paper from trees after reading about the technique in one of the books. If he could produce paper on a large scale using wood instead of animal leather, he could become rich. More than that, he believed that this way he could end hunger in the north. In this way, she and Valhalla would be the reason why many lives would be saved. Leonel feels emotional upon hearing this. It's good to know that she is saving people, even if indirectly. Happy that his words have touched the princess, he looks outside, realizing they are already approaching the castle entrance. "Welcome to Palirod," says Soaz happily. Meanwhile, in the castle, the maids rush around to get everything ready for the king's arrival. And of course, they gossip while they work. One of them asks if her friend has heard the latest gossip, that the king can talk to animals. The other maid is incredulous at her colleague's words, but the gossip monger insists that rumors say His Majesty scared off a pack of huge wolves using just a few words, and that he developed this ability after hitting his head during an accident in the mountains. One of them comments that she heard a white rat appeared and taught him how to do it, but the other retorts, saying it didn't matter how he managed it. What really mattered was that His Majesty was even more magnificent than the wizards of Valhalla. In the background, Soaz passes by with Noel, shaking his head, listening to the rumors and mocking him for being more magnificent than a sorcerer. With a sigh, he explains that Duke Arrington has been talking too much around, all because he likes Soaz a lot. The two walk for a while, and Noel, curious, asks where they are going. Soaz opens the luxurious golden doors, and answering Noel's question, he presents her with his office. Soaz sits in his chair, lamenting that a lot of work related to the kingdom has piled up during the time he was missing. A maid approaches, placing cookies on the table in front of Noel, who gets excited upon realizing they are cookies with jelly. While Soaz worked, the protagonist indulged herself, filling her belly with her beloved cookies. He then comments to Noel that he is curious about something, asking what it means to be a Glasha. Since in ancient times, people did not have surnames, so why did only the royal family of Valhalla have Glasha in their names? Noel swallows the last piece of her cookie, then decides to satisfy the young king's curiosity. She recalls that, as she had mentioned, the sorcerers were like gods to the people suffering in the north, and thus to honor the great sorceress in the highest possible way, they decided to honor part of her name, Glasha. This was the promise made to her. Thus, the only ones who could have a surname were the first sorceress and her heirs, as they were able to use magic without the power of the Astra. Soaz is amazed to learn that the princess's lineage can use magic without the Astra. Realizing this, Noel explains that those of her lineage have magic running in their veins. They say it was because the first sorceress ate a part of the Astra, but no one knows for sure. But one thing is known for certain. No matter what happens, they all are born with sea green hair and eyes. He explains that the Romalials also all were born with silver hair, regardless of which lineage they mixed with. He concluded that perhaps they were truly destined to be together. Noel is confused, asking how that makes sense. He wonders how much more beautiful she would be when the curse was broken and she returned to being human. Just imagining it made him feel like his heart would explode. Remembering that he wanted to show something to Noel, he stands up excitedly. He takes her by the wrist and comments that he wants to take her to the most beautiful place in the palace. He drags her through the hallways excitedly, until they finally enter a room, and Leonel is impressed. Soaz says that, as he promised, if she needed the library of Himidion, he would bring pieces of it little by little until it was complete before her eyes. Leonel notices a magical particle floating in front of her. Looking at the books, she notices that the particles intensify. Impressed, she wonders if that could be residual magic trapped in the books. As she climbs the spiral staircase, Soaz explains that on the first floor are books about magical circles. On the second floor, books with medicines to use in battle and magic spells. And on the third floor, more varied books that are still being cataloged. He looks proudly at Noel, asking if he did a good job. With a smile, she says he did a great job, indeed, and it's the most useful thing he has done so far. Soaz blushes, embarrassed to hear Leonel's compliment. He murmurs to himself for being so happy with so little. Soaz walks over to Noel and picks her up excitedly. He confesses that he doesn't want to lose the miracle of having met her. Although we couldn't be together in the past, how about we spend our future together? He says, surprising Leonel. Thinking about the future makes Noel feel a bit insecure. Does she have a future? Will she be able to move on? But she quickly recoils as she sees something in her path. Renan? She wonders mentally as she sees something reflected on the path while the path itself begins to crack. The reflection of a man with dark blue hair and a red liquid in his hands says it's all her fault because she refused to accept his feelings for her. Everything he did was out of love. The macabre voice echoes in her mind. Trying not to think about the trauma of her past, she covers Soaz's mouth. and asks him to put her down. She steps away from Soaz as he sadly says it was the first time he confessed his love to someone. Looking at the ground sadly, he assumes her rejection is because he is not good enough for her. He continues saying that he will dedicate himself to improving. But out of nowhere, Noel screams, "No, that doesn't matter," she says, almost crying. Soaz is surprised to see her reaction. He crouches down, feeling depressed. "Soaz, why do you think I want to go to Hymidian? To find the secret room?" He replies, still surprised. She confirms that yes. But to be more precise, what she is looking for is the forbidden book that is locked there. Another treasure that the first sorceress brought with her. So that perhaps she understands the reason why her destruction magic failed. She thinks to herself. Continuing now in a loud voice, she explains that a forbidden book is forbidden for a reason. Just turning a page can engulf you in negative magic and drive you insane. Even her mother, who is the queen and a powerful sorceress, was afraid to look at the book. And the only reason she decided to look inside it, knowing all this, is that she turned into a ferret. She believes that no matter how tempting the content of the book is, she is still in the body of a pure animal. So she has no chance of succumbing to temptations. In summary, she explains that she is betting that her theory is correct because the stakes she is making are high. Whether she will go insane or make the book's content hers, no one knows. A fear dominates Soaz as he hears Noel's words. He questions why she is speaking as if she is going to die. She turns to Soaz seriously, confirming that she will perish. But this time the destruction will not fail, and she will take Astra with her, and both will disappear from this world. Soaz is devastated to hear this. The only thing he can say is, why? Desperate, he questions why this, if she said the necklace was powerless when separated from the stone. She says that even so, since the chain exists, it means the stone is somewhere too. And this makes it an opportunity for another disaster to happen. In denial, he shouts that they can simply hide the chain forever. But unfortunately, there is nothing in this world that can never be found, says Noel sadly. She says she is happy that he has feelings for her. But she is someone who shouldn't exist in this world at this time. Whoever said anything to you for living on in your life? Retorts Soaz. He adds the fact that 1,000 years pass and nothing happened because of the necklace. Noel calls him by name in a serious tone, saying that he knows what she says is true. In despair, Soaz begins to cry. He asks why it has to be her to carry all the responsibility. Noel replies that he is correct and that she is not obliged to take on the responsibilities. But if she hadn't used the destruction magic in the past, the whole world would have ended, not just Valhalla. It's just that she is tired of all this. The price for using forbidden magic was very high, and besides destroying her beloved kingdom, she was condemned to live in the body of an immortal animal. Do you know what it means to be immortal? She asks with a somber expression. To see the trees around you wither and rot. The rocks wear down so much that they turn into grains of sand and disappear. Animals live for a maximum of 20 years. An eternal loneliness. That even trying to escape through sleep, in her dreams, the same scene repeated before her eyes. The day she destroyed her kingdom, the voices of her subjects screaming for her to save them. But there she was memorizing a spell capable of destroying them all. The 1,000 years she lived as a ferret were a true hell. So please, Soaz, please help me end this suffering. Soaz, moved and without saying anything, hugs her tightly. He begins to apologize repeatedly. With a voice heavy with sadness, he says he should have been more attentive to her feelings. Soaz holds her tighter while she gives him gentle pats on the shoulder, trying to console him. Noel clears her throat to change the subject. Then she asks where that portrait of her is. He had mentioned that he found it in Hymidian, and since they are in the place where the books from the ruins were brought, she imagined that the portrait would be there too. Wiping her tears, he explains that the things related to her are kept elsewhere. She looks around searching. Soaz continues speaking, saying that actually the things related to her are in his room. Clearly judging the young man, she comments that she is not even surprised by this information anymore. Soaz ignores Noel's comment and promises to show her after dinner, but she declines. He stands up and asks if there is any book from that place she would like to read. Noel thinks a bit about books she could use. Any book about curses and seals, or about Astra and the Forbidden Book. Those would be a good option, she concludes. With a smile, Soaz then says that he will definitely find useful books for her. He steps away from Noel, searching for the books on the shelves. When he is far enough away, he stops. His expression changed, revealing a look of discomfort and pain, accompanied by a slight groan of frustration. Tears stream down his face, revealing a silent cry. He knows he is being selfish, yet he does not want her to disappear from his life. But what could he do to stop her? How could he tell someone who has gone through everything she has that she should keep moving forward? That she should live? How does he do that? After a few minutes of venting, Soaz composes himself. He takes one of the books from the shelf. Determined to do what is within his reach for now, and maybe an opportunity will arise and Noel will change her mind about her future. Meanwhile, in another part of the library, Noel walks among the shelves, feeling a nostalgic sensation for being in a place full of magical energy. Suddenly, the necklace around her neck begins to vibrate. The chain seems to be reacting to something. The chain of the Ostra necklace holds all the magic of the world embedded in its small links. If it is still reacting with so little magical energy, maybe she is capable of performing a bit of magic. Noel concentrates, determined to start with the basics based on the book Fundamentals of Advanced Magic by Richelieu. Then she would use the application spell found in Notions of Magic. Finally, she would resort to the spell of aesthetic references to reduce the expenditure of magical energy. She opens her eyes determined. This has to work, she thinks. Soaz approaches with a pile of books, and Noel asks how far they are from Hymidian. Although he does not understand the question, he replies that they are about 3 days away. And what if we could reduce that time to 30 seconds? She comments with a confident smile on her face. Soaz is shocked. Could that really be possible? Asking him to bring a pen and paper. Then she declared that she would show why she was called the greatest sorceress of her era. Excited to see the person he admires most in action, Soaz drops the books he was carrying and runs off to fetch the requested items. Shortly after, Soaz returns with the requested items and some books. He places heavy books on the table, making a loud thud, and begins to open an ink jar quickly. With everything prepared, Noel opens the parchment paper and concentrates, going over everything in her mind. Soaz watches her very excitedly, almost not believing that he will witness Leonoel draw a magical circle. Only then does he notice something that makes him curious. How is she going to draw now that she is a ferret and has small paws instead of hands? Noel then stretches her little arm towards the feather, already struggling to reach it. When she finally manages to grab the feather, she starts to draw, clearly with a lot of difficulty as the lines are just random scribbles. Frustrated, she throws the feather behind her, feeling useless. Soaz, who was behind her watching, catches the feather almost by reflex. A little sad while observing the feather, he asks if that means she can't use magic. But Noel looks at him, asking what he means by that. Isn't it obvious? You're going to draw the magic circles for me, she says, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Soaz is completely surprised and perplexed by what he just heard. How am I going to draw a magic circle? If I can't use magic and have never done this before. Despite Soaz's concern, Noel tells him not to worry because as long as he follows exactly what she says, everything will be fine. Even so, he doesn't seem very confident. She then taps her paw on the stack of books, saying that everything will be fine because he has everything they need right there. Okay, let's get started, says Noel, clearly excited while Soaz maintains an expression of insecurity. Without wasting any time, she begins to instruct Soaz to draw a triangle in the bottom right corner, then to write the phrase on the third line and also to copy a shape from the book. The young king tries to keep up as best as he can, but Noel, probably due to her excitement, gives orders one after the other and very quickly, until she stops at a specific page of one of the books, asking Soaz to pay close attention to that part. The water droplets, the number 11, and the magic circle that consists of a circle with a sun in its center. Smiling, she continues explaining that the water droplet was the symbol of magic and its essential element. Just as a plant needs water to grow, magic also needs its fundamental strength to exist. That's why they are drawing it first, right at the base of the drawing. Now that the base has the flow of magic, it needs pillars to support the circle. And that's where the number 11 would come in. It will serve as a pillar to support the magic circle. Very excited, she continued saying that both the water droplets and the number 11 were present in almost all magic circles, forming their fundamental base. Then, she pointed to the drawing and explained that the circle and the sun were the most important factors at that moment, as they would determine the location of the spell. Soaz, attentive, followed her instructions and made the strokes as she asked. Noel reinforces that without the circle and the sun, they could end up being teleported to the middle of the ocean, for example. Observing the joy on Noel's face and in her words, Soaz clearly realizes that she seemed to be having a lot of fun. Perhaps it was the first time he had seen her so animated since he met her. Without thinking much, he ends up commenting, "Noel, you really love magic, don't you?" But she doesn't say anything in response to that. Instead, she calls Soaz's attention for having stopped drawing, saying she didn't see his hand moving. Startled, he quickly returned to work. And with a firm movement, he draws the last line of the circle with the sun in the center, completing the magic circle. Noel looks at the drawing proudly, saying that this was the teleportation magic circle with energy conservation, a technique created by Glacia Leonil. Soaz also seems proud and relieved that Noel appears satisfied with what he drew. 3 days later, in Soaz's office, we hear the sound of a pen writing frantically. He and the Duke are discussing matters of the kingdom. It seems that Soaz is getting as much done as possible since he will be absent for a few days on a small mission with Noel. "But, Your Majesty, will everything be all right?" questions the worried Duke. Soaz replies that the foxes that survived crossed the border near Shulapa, so there is nothing they can do now. Still hesitant, the Duke worries about what might happen if they stop sending pelts, especially since it is clear that what the other kingdom really wants is a reason to start a war. Soaz knows that they will probably demand something difficult to obtain or of extremely high value. And after they fail to deliver what was requested, they will eventually demand the books of Hymidion. Soaz knows how greedy the Emperor is, which is why it was very likely that he would actually act that way. He questions what they could really do, and with a confident smile, he says that surely giving anything to the Empire was not in his plans. The Duke, excited, interpreted his words as a sign that the young king already had a plan, praising him with great expectation. Soaz remains mysterious, saying that his decision will depend on how the Emperor responds. The Duke bows, showing respect to the king, and says that if the idea is his, he has no reason not to be at ease. He also comments that as Her Majesty had requested, he limited all entries to the library in the last 2 days. Soaz thanks the Duke, congratulating him on his efficiency, and returns to work. But instead of leaving, the Duke stays there, starting to make noise with his mouth as if he wanted to say something. This ends up catching the king's attention. Soaz asks what he wanted. The Duke then expressed his concern, reminding him that it had only been 5 days since the king had returned after disappearing, questioning whether it was really safe for him to leave the castle again. But to the Duke's surprise, Soaz informs him that he is not going anywhere. Curious, he asks why the king limited entry to the library then? Soaz replied with an enigmatic smile, saying that it was a secret. However, he hinted that he might let the Duke know. He approaches the Duke and begins to whisper some words to him. But then he suddenly stops, saying that he changed his mind. The poor Duke becomes frustrated, commenting that he was almost telling him what it was. He complains, saying that he is sad because after everything he has done for Her Majesty. Soaz apologizes, saying that it is nothing personal, but it is just not the right time. He then rests his hand on his chin and gives a small, silly smile as if he is fondly remembering something. He reflected quietly, admitting that he felt an undeniable strength in her words. Seeing the passionate expression of his king, the Duke becomes very curious. Her? He thinks, trying to process what he just heard. S-H-E. Who is she? He thinks in total shock after finally digesting the information. And her? Who is Her Majesty talking about? The Duke questions, this time out loud. But Soaz's response leaves the poor Duke even more lost, as he says that the Duke knows who he is talking about. But Her Majesty has not been with any woman by his side lately, comments the Duke while remembering that the only thing he noticed is that Soaz is always with the ferret by his side since he returned from the mountains. And then he realizes that no one but him knows that Noel is actually human. Despite realizing this, he knows he cannot reveal to people about Noel, at least not yet. But Soaz is pulled from his thoughts by the Duke's trembling voice, questioning why he hadn't told him anything before. Soaz is startled to hear this. Does he know? That the little ferret is actually Glacia Leonil, the last princess of Valhalla? The Duke then starts to tear up, emotional, remembering when he first met little Soaz and how he was a mischievous and innocent boy. But now he was all grown up and even found a lover. He never imagined that Soaz would be welcoming a queen so soon. After the former monarch passed away, Davide did everything to take care of the young king in the best way possible. The Duke, although not Soaz's biological father, always treated him with the affection of a father who loves his son. And thinking that there are many things he does not know about the young king makes him feel insecure and a little sad. Noticing the Duke's expression, Soaz begins to explain himself, but Davide interrupts him, half crying for not having told him something so important in his life as choosing a queen. Soaz is quite confused, Queen? What is the Duke talking about? But Davide does not notice the king's confusion. He is in a whirlwind of emotions, remembering the time he spent taking care of Soaz when he was just a boy. The Duke then starts to cry copiously, saying that he is very, very sad. A cry so loud that even a maid passing by the king's office was startled to hear the sobbing. Soaz massages his temples, mentally wondering how this happened, while the Duke continues crying beside him. The crying finally stops, and Soaz dares to glance sideways at the Duke. But to his surprise, he finds a Duke now in fury, asking Soaz to tell him that it is not true and that it was all a misunderstanding. Soaz gives a small smile upon hearing this. What makes the Duke hopeful is that he claims it was all a misunderstanding. Only instead, Soaz, with a passionate expression, says that he had no idea Davide was thinking the same as him. The poor Duke falls to the ground completely defeated after hearing Soaz. But then the young king comments that unfortunately his love is unrequited, which leaves Davide perplexed. Soaz, a bit upset, recalls the conversation he had with Leonoel earlier. Returning from his memories, Soaz explains that she wasn't exactly his type. What? How can your majesty not be someone's type? The Duke shouts, completely indignant. And then he begins to praise Soaz fervently, saying that his appearance surpassed any human standard, and that he was the most beautiful person ever to exist. Davide couldn't understand how it was possible for someone to reject the king. Soaz thanks for the compliment, clearly a bit embarrassed, while the Duke took a deep breath, trying to calm down. David clears his throat again. Curious, he asks which family the young lady comes from. The king replied that he couldn't reveal that. Then the Duke insists on at least knowing the young woman's age. Quickly, Soaz says she is 24 years old, but mentally he corrects himself, admitting he is 1,024. Davide begins to think of the noble women who are 24 years old. While the Duke was getting carried away by his own conclusions, Soaz just smiled, revealing nothing. The Duke starts to get worried, thinking that perhaps the young king might be in love with a committed woman. But Soaz comments that this would be impossible. If not for that, then why would anyone reject your majesty? Says the Duke, with curiosity eating away at him inside. Soaz, for his part, says there was nothing to be done as the woman he was talking about was greater than any queen of any nation. The king's words lead the Duke to suppose that the lover might be a real princess. With this thought, he remembers that the Princess of Kragberg is exactly 24 years old. If it really is her, then it means they will become a vassal kingdom of the empire. Davide thinks, worried. The Duke starts to stare at Soaz while murmuring very softly. Noticing this, Soaz changes the subject, commenting that it is getting late. He then asks the Duke if he brought what he had requested, finally pulling him out of his whirlwind of thoughts. Quickly, the Duke hands a basket to His Majesty and curiously asks what he needs a picnic basket with snacks for. He replies that he plans to go on a picnic with Noel. Upon hearing that it was about the little ferret, the Duke lost interest in an instant. After checking the contents of the picnic basket, Soaz closes the basket and thanks while congratulating the Duke for the great job. Soaz then takes the basket and walks to the outside of the castle. He walks to the library while the Duke follows him in silence, clearly curious since he was not invited. Soaz cheerfully greets the guards at the entrance of the library, probably following Soaz's instructions. The Duke must have reassigned them to the library door. The Duke, seeing this, is confused and mentally questions why the king is going to the library with a picnic basket. Does he intend to have a picnic surrounded by books? As soon as the soldiers open the door, Soaz begins to enter but stops, turning to Davide and ordering him to leave. After that, Soaz enters the library and the large gates begin to close behind him, making a loud thud as they close completely. Outside, the Duke remained silent and a bit uncomfortable. Trying to disguise it, he asks the guards if any of them have children. The guards respond in unison that they do not. With a sigh, the Duke turns and begins to leave, but not before commenting to the guards that in that case, they could not understand his pain, leaving the guards completely confused. He walks away with his head down. The guards just look at each other, totally not understanding anything. Still clinging to the past, Davide remembers the time when Soaz was just a little boy, coming close to him carrying a picnic basket almost his size, inviting the Duke to go with him, excitedly affirming that things are much better and more fun when fairs are in the company of Davide. The Duke, moved by the memory, filled with tears. Meanwhile, outside the library, the guards hear murmurs coming from inside the library. They look at each other, clearly finding that quite strange. One of them turns towards the door, wondering what the hell is happening in there. The other guard puts his hand to his ear, trying to listen better to what is happening inside and suggesting that perhaps they should go in to check. The other man reinforces that they should remain vigilant and that these orders came directly from the king. Soaz had left clear instructions before entering. No matter what was heard inside, no one should enter. Outside, the guards repeated his words, trying to convince themselves, while one admitted to being scared and the other called him a coward. The brown-haired guard brought his ear even closer to the door, almost pressing against it, determined to listen to what the murmurs were saying. While murmuring that he was curious, the guard was startled when a loud bang came from inside. Soon after, an even louder crash echoed from inside, followed by another and then another, and a strong light began to escape through the cracks of the door. Terrified by the intense light coming from the library, the guards panicked. One of them apologized for being curious, while the other shouted that they hadn't heard anything. One of the guards, overcome by fear, shouted asking to be spared. Trembling, he closed his eyes and raised his hands, trying to protect himself. But gradually he realized that nothing had happened, and confused, he dared to look again. After the flash and the deafening noise, everything returned to normal, as if nothing had happened, and thus the castle was silent once more. Meanwhile, far away from there, in the ruins, Soaz sat waiting with the basket beside him when he cast a glance at Noel. Curious, he thought she seemed to have many worries on her mind. He wondered how she was feeling. Upon seeing her kingdom for the first time in 1,000 years, Noel spent a few minutes observing everything, as if those ruins were proof that Valhalla was truly gone. Then she turned to Soaz, thanking him for being patient and waiting for her to have this moment. Soaz then asked if they should go in, and Noel approached, affirming that they should. She noted that the entrance had managed to remain in good condition and then asked how they would get to the basement. Soaz, who was leading the way, said it was this way, asking her to follow him. He commented that 50 years ago, due to a great earthquake, part of the floor collapsed. Noel was surprised to learn that there had been an earthquake and ended up asking Soaz about it. He confirmed that there indeed had been one and that it had apparently been quite intense. But thanks to that, a hole was created with the collapse of the floor, which allowed him to discover the library in the basement. Leonore was still bothered by this earthquake story. She found it very unlikely, since there had never been an earthquake in the north in 1,000 years, and the locations were very close. If the earthquake had been that intense, she would have felt something in the north. Worried and certain that something was strange, she said they should hurry and get to the basement soon. They then quickly descended the stairs leading to the basement. As soon as they reached the basement door, Noel leaned against it, confirming her suspicions. There are traces of magical energy on the door, just like the one she felt in the library emanating from the books brought from Hymidion. Surely someone had been there before them, and the hole that Soaz believes was caused by an earthquake was actually made by this person. With a serious expression, Noel said, "This confirms that there is another sorcerer out there who also has knowledge of the Forbidden Book." Incredulous, Soaz stated it was very unlikely that there was another sorcerer besides Noel, but she countered, reminding him that it also doesn't make sense for her to have lived for 1,000 years. Therefore, the existence of another sorcerer would be no surprise at all. Even if someone were to rise from the dead, she wouldn't be that surprised. Noel wasted no time and began to smell the air as she walked through the place, for the first time in this story embracing her animal side. She then approached one of the furniture pieces, resting her small paw on it. Noel turned to Soaz and asked if he thought he could move that shelf. He looked determinedly at the shelf while starting to roll up his sleeves, assuring her that he would manage. Looking at Soaz's hands, Noel noticed how delicate and thin they were, reflecting to herself that, despite his confident words, it would be necessary to have strength to deal with what they would face. And given his slender build, it would probably be a very difficult task for him. Hearing Noel, he murmured that perhaps they should have brought Shilos along. Soaz paused for a second and then planted his feet on the ground and pushed the shelf with both hands. The piece of furniture slid relatively smoothly, revealing an opening in the shape of a door behind it. Soaz ran his hand through his hair in a carefree gesture, revealing a confident air. Then he turns to Noel with a smile on his lips and asks, "What did you say about Shilos again?" Surprised that he managed to do it and embarrassed for underestimating Soaz, Noel apologizes to the young king, who simply sighs, saying that it's all right. He then picks up the small ferret in his lap, and observing the door-shaped gap, he questions how they will enter since there is no doorknob on the door. The two stare at that door for a few seconds. Then Noel suggests that they first calmly look at all the corners of the door to see if perhaps there is a hidden doorknob. So they search for a few minutes, touching every corner and crevice of the door. But with no luck, it seems impossible to open that door. Soaz comments that maybe they need to open it with magic. His words pierce the pride of our little protagonist, who at the moment is just a ferret with limited magic. Annoyed, Noel kicks the door, wondering how the hell the invader used magic since magic disappeared years ago. One of Noel's kicks ends up hitting the door awkwardly, hurting her and causing the pain to course through her body like an electric shock, making her sweat cold and fall silent for a moment in pain. Quickly, Soaz picks her up in his lap, worried if she is okay. In his lap, she whines about having hurt her foot. Soaz scolds her, saying that he understands she is irritated and frustrated, but that is no reason to go kicking a stone door. As soon as he finishes speaking, the sound of something heavy moving echoes through the room. And with that, the stone door moves, opening the way. The two look incredulously as literally kicking the door worked. Well, regardless of why the door opened, they decide to enter the new room. Worried and cautious, Soaz is concerned that a possible invader might go there frequently. But Noel thinks it's unlikely. After all, it has been 50 years. He must have passed away from old age by now. But even so, he must be small fry since he needed to cause a massive earthquake to make a small hole in the wall. If he is a sorcerer, he must be quite mediocre. While saying this, Noel gets more and more involved in Soaz's case, and he ends up commenting that she seems to be quite scared for someone who thinks the possible invader is mediocre. She shouts, embarrassed, claiming that she is only like this because she is feeling very cold. Are you cold? A mysterious voice echoes through the room. This puts Soaz on alert and surprises him since he hadn't felt anyone's presence nearby. Well, that's not a good thing, is it? The voice continues. But to their surprise, there is no one there, which leaves both quite apprehensive. A floating flame appears out of nowhere as the voice says that it has been a long time since it received visitors, so it cannot allow them to be cold. And then several other flames begin to ignite, forming a corridor of flames. The voice asks if it is warm enough now. The voice then starts laughing, saying that they must be really scared since it's almost as if it can smell the fear emanating from them. Then Noel's expression changes. She seems to have realized something. She asks Soaz to put her down, but he hesitates, saying it might be dangerous. Reminding him that she is immortal, she asks him to worry about himself. Noel then gets down from his lap. With a confident stance, she introduces herself. My name is Glasha Leonoel, the last princess and last sorceress of Valhalla. Who are you? Show yourself. Glasha. The mysterious voice repeats in a thoughtful tone. That's a name I was wanting to hear again. I am the protector. Someone who cares for and protects this place. The voice concludes. Noel is surprised to hear this. She had never heard of protectors in that place. The voice then invites her to enter, and a small glowing orb appears in front of them. The voice instructs them to follow the light. The two begin to follow, but Soaz, apprehensive, comments, if this could be a trap? The little orb approaches Soaz, making quick movements in front of him as if scolding him. Then the voice reminds them both that it can hear everything. And Soaz quickly apologizes. The light then begins to move slowly again and says that it forgives him. After all, it likes young people who admit their mistakes immediately. It continues commenting that it has met many rude people in the past, and that was really annoying. Noel interrupts her, asking if she was ever human in the past. Excited, the voice confirms that yes, and even says that she too in the past went on adventures around the world. Their path seems to be, again, but the voice is too busy recounting her past to notice anything. She says that when she was human, she was a warrior who wielded a longsword. And modesty aside, she was quite the charming warrior, and that she fought battles with many other warriors many times. While she speaks, Soaz continues trying to get her attention, but she ignores him, very mesmerized, remembering a distant past. And that starts to irritate Noel a lot. And Noel finally explodes with anger, very irritated. Have you gone deaf from getting old? Can't you see that the boy said the path is blocked, you old hag? The voice again starts to laugh, commenting that Leonoel takes after her mother, which makes Noel even more irritated. She clenches her fists tightly. That was the last straw for Leonoel, who explodes again in fury that a stranger dared to mock her lineage. But then the voice says that of course she would dare to speak, after all. It is her lineage. Then the stone wall in front of them finally begins to move, revealing a completely new and beautiful room. The voice then says that this place was her tomb and, at the same time, the punishment for a forgotten promise. She then addressed the young ones, welcoming them to her secret chamber. The small ball of light hovers in front of him, expanding first and then shining intensely. Then the voice finally introduces herself as the image of a woman with sea green hair appears. Ultra Sega looks confidently and smilingly at the two. Automatically, Leonore starts to sweat cold, remembering all the beautiful words she just said to her ancestor, like, "You old deaf woman." And the boy said the path is blocked, "You old gaga." And also, "Who are you to dare speak like that about us?" I guess I don't even need to say that our protagonist is deeply regretful. If she weren't immortal, she would have died of embarrassment at that moment. Soaz, unaware of what was happening in the protagonist's mind, starts calling for her. Realizing that she doesn't respond, he insists, saying that now is not the time for that, and then asks her to look over there. She looks at the table where the forbidden book should be, but there is nothing. They become worried, assuming that someone took the book. Ultra looks at the two and asks if they also came because of the forbidden book. Also, "So you mean you saw who stole the book?" Soaz questions, still in a panic. Ultra approaches Soaz and says that before she says anything, she has something to ask. She looks in Noel's direction and asks why she called herself the last sorceress. Noel feels a bit intimidated by Ultra's gaze, but she begins to explain that 1,000 years ago, there was a sorcerer who coveted the power of the Ostra and ended up going mad and completely losing control. There was a sad and intense battle, and she was the only survivor. Ultra listens to this and becomes a bit thoughtful, concluding that the magic she gifted to the world ultimately created a tragedy. Leonore, upon hearing Ultra's words, takes the blame for everything, saying that it all happened because she was negligent. Ultra cuts her off, saying that there is nothing more senseless than pointing fingers at someone for something that has already happened, and that she prefers to hear about who defeated the out-of-control sorcerer. Still a bit confused, Noel says that this person would be her. Ultra seems to feel a bit proud to know this. She recalls that in the past, whenever Louvel visited, she always boasted about how her daughter was incredible and a top-class sorceress. And every time she heard the queen talk about the princess, she remembered how she herself was in childhood. Curious to one day meet her in person when she became queen, but after Louvel, no one ever went there again. So she assumed that Valhalla had found its ruin. This shouldn't have happened. She was eager to spend time with Leonore. Ultra felt very lonely, and to forget the loneliness, she ended up falling into a deep sleep, awakening from her deep sleep, alarmed by the presence of an intruder. But that was after he had already taken the book. Ultra apologizes to Noel, saying that because of her loneliness, she ended up putting them in a difficult situation. Shocked, Noel asks her not to apologize, because if she had taken care of the Ostra in the first place, none of this would have happened, affirming that it is all her fault. Soaz observes this and feels disheartened by all that pity party. Why would it be Noel's fault? He wonders mentally. Shaking his head negatively, Ultra insists on saying that Noel is not to blame, saying that whoever stole the Gladra the Forbidden Book surely did it to obtain the magic that he lacks. Since Noel mentioned that magic has disappeared from the world, the book must have been the only method left for him. But she is sure that the thief must have failed in the mission, for even she barely managed to obtain magic even after swallowing a piece of the oyster. Leonore is very surprised to learn that Ultra swallowed a piece of the oyster, while Soaz sits excited to hear more stories from Valhalla. Ultra laughs as she recounts that she took the pieces that fell from it, crushed them, and drank them, and even so, it had a really bad taste. She then explains that Gadre means magical music, that is, music that gives magic. If you don't listen to the melody while reading it, then it is nothing more than a normal book. The two look confused at her, clearly not understanding what she just said. Realizing this, she explains more simply, saying that the thief will not be able to use the book to its fullest potential. Thoughtfully, she says that possibly the only magic the thief would be able to use would be to extend someone's life. As this magic works like an enchantment, he would only need a little magic to use. They remain silent for a moment after discovering this. Soaz says that then this means that even if 50 years have passed, the thief could be perfectly fine and healthy. A new uncomfortable silence dominates the environment as everyone realizes this fact. Worried, Noel asks if Ultra believes that the thief succeeded. She says that, well, if he knew about the power of Galdry and also seemed to have quite a bit of courage. With that kind of ambition, it is very likely that he succeeded, and maybe even a little more than that. But still, his magical energy didn't seem like much, so maybe he didn't succeed. Ultra explains, trying to ease the situation. Soaz glances at Noel and notices that she is clearly holding back from getting angry with Ultra. Meanwhile, Noel mentally repeats that Ultra is her ancestor and that she shouldn't get angry, she can't be disrespectful, takes a deep breath, and doesn't let anger take over. Soaz comically begins to imagine what would happen if Noel exploded with anger. He then raises his hand, like a student in a classroom, saying that he would like to ask Miss Ultra something. He asks which promise she broke that made her stay trapped there as the protector of the place instead of just resting in peace. But Ultra seems to not remember exactly why, since it has been a long time since she passed away. Trying to recall, she says she believes she made a contract that stated she should take care of a dangerous object and never lose it. But why, she can't remember. Following Soaz's example, Noel raises her hand and asks with whom she made the contract. Ultra replies that she made the contract with an elderly woman who gave her gladre when she was a child. Irritated by Ultra's vague answer, Noel tries again to contain her anger while Soaz is excited about yet another piece of information about the story of Valhalla. Perhaps that woman was the real first witch in the world. Ultra says she would love to tell more about the agreement with the woman, but she would have to talk for days, so maybe on another occasion. What she can say is that to protect Galdre, a part of her soul remained trapped in that place. Soaz comments the obvious that I'm sure we would all like to have commented. But you lost the book, he says innocently. Noel scolds him for that, saying that he is being disrespectful. But Ultra says it's okay. After all, what he said is true. And she was not able to protect Galdre, Ultra says, clearly saddened. She then looks in the direction of the two and asks who the young man is that is asking her questions. Noticing that he is clearly not a sorcerer, she then asks if by any chance he and Lionel are lovers. Quickly, Noel responds that it is nothing like that, and they are not lovers. She looks at Soaz's blushing face and scolds him for making that face. Noel explains quite calmly that he is called Soaz von Ramaliel, the king who rules the kingdom built where Valhalla existed before its fall. She adds that they just crossed paths by chance and came together to this point, and that he is in no way her lover. Noel breathes heavily after practically vomiting a lot of information. She then realizes that Soaz heard everything she just said and worries that maybe she was a bit cruel. Soaz, in turn, with a serious expression, confirms that Noel is right, and that they are not lovers, but he is trying his best to win her over. Poor Noel nearly dies of embarrassment upon hearing this. Soaz continues saying that he would like to free Noel from the curse, and if in the process they become lovers, he would love to live forever by her side. He asks Ultra to help him free Noel from the curse. For the sake of his descendant and a young man in love, he pleads for her to break the curse. Upon hearing that, Ultra cannot hold back her laughter. Crying from laughing so much, she says he doesn't even need to ask, as she is a big fan of love, especially this intense, true love of young people like them. Ultra then asks, what exactly is Noel's curse? But before Soaz can say anything, Noel steps forward and says she will tell the details herself. We are then transported to a small flashback. A new day begins, and in a luxurious room, we see various papers with magical circles scattered on the floor. Among them is an invitation addressed to Leonore, inviting her to a workshop where various intellectuals from different kingdoms will gather to discuss the theory of magical circles. Leonore then gets up, still quite sleepy. She looks around, thinking that it is already the last day of the workshop. Leonore stands up and starts getting ready for the workshop. Someone enters her room asking if she is ready yet. Leonore looks in the direction of the woman and, calling her Celine, asks what she is doing there so early, as she usually doesn't wake up this early. Celine, who is accompanied by her daughter, says she is excited about today's workshop. And besides that, after this workshop, they will finally return home. She asks her daughter if she is excited to see her father again, and the girl responds enthusiastically that she is. The girl, named Dalmia, looks in Noel's direction, running to hug her, clearly excited to see her. The two share a warm hug, and Noel asks if she slept well. The girl then whispers in Noel's ear, saying that she thinks her mother won't have fun at the workshop today, because every day she complains that the workshops are very boring. Noel, clearly enjoying the gossip, confesses to Dalmia that she actually also finds the workshops quite boring. The girl turns and disagrees with Noel, saying that she has a lot of fun at the workshops. Touching Dalmia's nose, Noel says that is because she only does the fun things. Meanwhile, she and Agape are super busy during the workshops. On the other hand, Selene, using Dalmia as an excuse, always tries to escape the workshops. That's why Noel doesn't seem to understand how she is so bored. Embarrassed, Selene tries to make an excuse for Noel's jab, saying it's because she was doing outside work. Noel then retorts, saying that for someone who is working as much as she claims, her skin is strangely glowing and smooth. Selene changes the subject, saying that if they don't leave soon, they will be late. Clearly, Noel is very close to Selene and has a lot of affection for Dalmia. The girl comments that she needs to buy something nice to take to her father. Leaving the room, Noel comments that they probably won't have time for that, but it's okay because Goya needs to go on a diet. They then leave the mansion, heading to a carriage where a man with orange hair, wearing the same style of outfit as them, is standing, waiting for something. Dalmia greets him, calling him Agape. When he turns around, Noel is startled to see the man's huge dark circles. Agape explains that he couldn't sleep that night. He had a nightmare where Adora appeared to be suffering a lot while asking for his help. Noel looks thoughtful and worried for a moment. She takes something from her pocket and puts it in Agape's mouth, telling him to chew on it and stop thinking negative thoughts. He chews, sensing a familiar sweet taste, realizing that it is actually Noel's favorite chocolate. She comments that she had saved it to eat later but decided to give it to him. Noel adds that Adora, Agape's older sister, is too healthy to have any kind of problem, so he shouldn't worry. She remembers the last time she and Adora went on an expedition together, and the girl carried a bag almost her size as if it were nothing. Besides, they will return as soon as the workshop is over. Agape continues chewing the chocolate, thoughtful, paying attention to Noel's words. And he convinces himself that his dream must not mean anything and that everything will be fine. They then go to the workshop carefree. Then the scene cuts to a woman with orange hair, probably Adora, with a look of despair as she tries to control her trembling hand. She cries, pleading for him not to do this. Astra is in front of her, surrounded by a magical barrier. Her trembling hand continues to reach for the necklace even as she tries to hold back. As soon as she touches the barrier, she screams in despair, feeling intense pain as the barrier attacks her. Meanwhile, a man wearing the same uniform as her and Leonoel watches calmly. Adora, crying and gasping from the intense pain, looks at the man asking why he is doing this. She says that they should be the protectors of Astra, but the man says nothing and just watches. In despair, she screams his name, Renan. A voice that seems to come from the necklace asks what he is doing. The voice explains that even though she is a woman, she will die if exposed to his power. Renan then tells the necklace that if it weakens its strength a little, Adora wouldn't have to suffer so much, and that it's all its fault. Astra, noticing that poor Adora has fainted from pain, orders Renan to stop this madness at once. But the bastard just yawns, not caring about the pain he is causing poor Adora. He looks bored at Astra, asking why he had to make things difficult and allow only women to hold him. As he says this, Adora finally manages to reach the necklace. With a piercing look, Renan says that if Astra hadn't made it difficult, he wouldn't have had to go so far. Astra's voice screams, "No," as Adora's hand closes around him. Poor Adora holds the necklace in one hand, fallen on the ground, clearly exhausted and defeated. Renan makes the necklace float from Adora's hand to himself. Meanwhile, the necklace protests, saying that he is innocent for thinking he can withstand his power. As the necklace is placed around Renan's neck, it begins to emit strange noises. Astra's voice continues echoing. "My power is one you should not desire. Your body will not be able to take it," warns Astra. "Please stop before it's too late," pleads Astra. Irritated, Renan snaps his fingers, silencing Astra's voice forever. He massages his neck, commenting that despite being noisy, Astra will be of great use. Renan begins to leave the room after fulfilling his objective. But he stops for a second, looking in Adora's direction, wondering if she will die if he simply walks away. He states that he has nothing against her. She just had the bad luck of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Adora moves her mouth slowly, but no sound comes out. Mentally, she calls for her brother. Apparently, they have some kind of telepathic communication. "Agape, can you hear me? Please, and don't let Leonoel come here. Renan has gone insane," warns Adora to her brother, using her last breath to alert her companions. Meanwhile, Renan has already begun his wave of destruction. He turns towards the door, wondering how long it will take until his lover comes to him. Meanwhile, in the workshop, a chair suddenly falls to the ground after someone stands up in shock. This person was Agape, who is panting in total panic, probably after hearing her sister's mental message and perhaps even feeling her pain. Leonoel, who is beside her, asks, "What is happening?" With a face filled with despair, Agape simply says that she needs to go to Valhalla now, and then quickly leaves. Selene stands up, telling Noel that she will go after Agape. She asks Noel to take care of Dalmia while she is away. Noel agrees and says she will find them as soon as she is done here. Selene just nods positively. One of the people observing the commotion approaches Leonoel, asking why two of the protectors have already left. The worried man questions if something has happened at Ostra's tower. Noel assures the man that he should not worry, because the protectors are extremely competent and that she alone would be enough to protect Valhalla. Despite speaking confidently, Noel clenches her hands, clearly worried. The scene cuts to Noel running towards the top of Ostra's tower. She has a look of despair, mentally questioning how can he? Apparently, she received a letter warning that Ranon stole Ostra and that the queen along with the protectors were battling against him. As she reaches the top, she has a terrible sight. Ranon is holding the queen by the neck while four protectors are clearly defeated and thrown on the ground. Ranon begins to squeeze tightly, clearly wanting to give the queen the same fate as Adora. Noel is in total panic seeing that scene, her eyes wide in a mix of surprise and terror. She seems unable to believe what she is seeing. "Mom? Is that you? This can't be happening," she thinks to herself. She then looks at her fallen companions, mentally saying their names. Agape, Goya, Missioner, Selena. Her trance of panic is interrupted by the loud noise of her mother being thrown to the ground. Tears begin to stream down Leonoel's face as she remains paralyzed in panic. Ranon finally seems to notice that someone has just arrived. Upon realizing it is Leonoel, Ranon smiles and blushes, then says, "You are late, my love." Noel remains motionless, her wide eyes shining in despair, as thick, silent tears flow down her face, but now this time, another feeling emerges. Anger. And that's it for today, folks. I hope you enjoyed the story. I won't lie, at first I thought Soaz would be a weak male lead, in the sense of lacking much personality and just being a fanboy. But as the story progressed, I began to realize he is much more complex and deep. He also has a cute and fun side, in addition to showing that he knows how to assert himself and be a true king who leads his people, as well as being very intelligent. If we overlook the insta-love part a bit, I would say he is the most lovable male lead I've seen in a long time. I feel like this story is about a protagonist who meets another protagonist. I just really wish the author had worked on their falling in love a little better. I understand that when you admire someone for so many years, you develop a certain affection for your idol, but for it to turn into this intense love out of nowhere is kind of hit or miss. It could have been more progressive for him to get to know her and fall in love gradually. The name of this work is Death to Lady White Ferret, and our recap covered up to chapter 25. If you want more, don't forget to like the video and subscribe so you won't miss any new videos I post. Kisses and see you next time.